She fired the old gardener for talking to her son until he exposed the secret hidden in their backyard. Imagine this: a wealthy single mother returning home early one evening, only to find the old gardener kneeling in her backyard, speaking softly to her young son. Her heart flared with anger. How dare he cross that line? In a rush of fury, she fired him on the spot. Caroline Hayes had built her life on strength. A senior lawyer in Boston, she carried the weight of long hours, endless cases, and the responsibility of raising her son Daniel alone. To the world, she looked unshakable. Tailored suits, sharp words, polished shoes, people respected her. They feared her, but at home, Caroline's strength came with distance. Daniel was 9 years old, a quiet boy with wide blue eyes that often drifted to the ground. He loved books, the kind filled with adventure and hidden worlds. Yet he rarely spoke. His silence worried Caroline, though she brushed it off as shyness. Their house stood tall and modern, a testament to her success. Behind it stretched a sprawling backyard. Trees lined the edges, leaves rustling like secrets, and among them worked Henry Whitmore, the gardener. An old man with wrinkled hands and a bent back, Henry had been with the property long before Caroline purchased it. Caroline never really noticed him. He trimmed hedges, pulled weeds, tended the roses. Quiet, invisible, ordinary, or so she believed, until that one night changed everything. Caroline returned home early, stepping into the backyard to call Daniel for dinner. But what she saw stopped her cold. Henry knelt beside her son near the oak tree. His voice was low, almost tender, as though he were sharing secrets meant only for Daniel's ears. Caroline's chest tightened. In that instant, her protective instinct screamed. Memories of news stories about strangers, cautionary tales of predators. Fear clouded her mind. She stormed forward, her heels crunching the gravel. "What are you doing with my son?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to slice the air. Henry startled, his old body flinching at her tone. Daniel's eyes went wide. "Mom, please," but Caroline cut him off. "You're finished. Don't come back here again." Her hand shook as she pointed toward the gate. Henry's lips pressed together, his shoulders drooping. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself. He simply lowered his head, removed his gloves, and walked away. Daniel's voice cracked. "Mama, no." But Caroline silenced him, pulling him inside. She believed she had done the right thing. What she didn't know was that her fury had dismissed the one person holding a truth buried deep in her own backyard. That night, Daniel refused to eat. He sat at the kitchen table, his spoon idle, his gaze fixed on the window. The silence between them stretched like a chasm. Finally, he whispered, "Why did you fire Mr. Henry?" Caroline sighed, trying to sound calm. "Because he crossed a line, sweetheart. He had no right to be talking to you like that." Daniel's voice trembled. "But he wasn't hurting me." Caroline softened, brushing his hair back. "I was protecting you. You'll understand when you're older." But Daniel's small hands clenched into fists, his eyes filled with tears. "No, Mama, you don't understand. He was helping me." The word stung Caroline. "Helping?" Her mind scrambled, unsure what he meant. She wanted to ask more, but Daniel pushed his chair back and retreated to his room, closing the door quietly. Alone in the kitchen, Caroline felt something gnaw at her chest. Doubt. A question she didn't want to face. What if she had been wrong? What if Henry wasn't a threat but something else entirely? For the first time in years, the woman who always had answers found herself shaken. The next day, Caroline tried to dismiss the incident. She buried herself in work, stacked with files and phone calls. Yet Daniel's words clung to her like shadows. He was helping me. That evening, Daniel slipped into the living room with a worn notebook clutched to his chest. His voice was soft. "Mr. Henry was teaching me things, Mama." Caroline raised an eyebrow. "Teaching you what?" Daniel hesitated, then held the notebook out. Inside were sketches, rough but recognizable. The old oak tree, the garden path, even the tiny bird bath at the far corner of the yard. Her chest tightened. "Daniel, you drew these?" He nodded. "Mr. Henry showed me how. He said the backyard keeps secrets, that if I listen and watch closely, I'll see them. He was showing me how to notice things." Caroline's throat went dry. Daniel rarely opened up. His teachers had worried he was falling behind, lost in silence. Yet here on these pages he was alive. That night, when Daniel was asleep, Caroline sat at the table staring at the drawings. And for the first time she wondered, Who really was this old gardener, unable to silence the questions? Caroline decided to find Henry. After asking a neighbor, she discovered he lived in a small cottage on the outskirts of town. When she arrived, the place startled her. The cottage was humble, its paint faded, the roof sagging. But the yard was alive. Wildflowers swayed in the wind, vines curled along fences, and butterflies hovered like drifting colors. Henry was kneeling among the flowers, his hands steady despite their age. He looked up, surprise flashing in his tired eyes. "Mrs. Hayes," he said softly. Caroline straightened, holding on to her pride. "We need to talk." "About my son?" Henry removed his hat, standing slowly. "I meant no harm." "I don't believe you," she replied coldly. But her voice lacked conviction. Henry met her gaze. His eyes weren't threatening, they were filled with something else. A quiet patience. Finally, he said, "Your son is special. He sees the world differently. Most people miss it. But not him. He just needed someone to show him how to look." Caroline's lips parted, but no words came. Something in his tone, steady, unwavering, unsettled her. Henry invited her inside. The cottage smelled of wood and earth, shelves lined with books, jars of seeds and sketches pinned to the walls. Caroline's eyes widened. The drawings, trees, flowers, landscapes mirrored Daniel's notebook. "You taught him this?" she asked, her voice cracking. Henry nodded. "I taught him what was once taught to me: observation, patience to see the language of the earth." Caroline shook her head. "But why? Why my son?" Henry's gaze softened. "Because I saw myself in him." He sat heavily in a chair, his hands trembling slightly. "When I was a boy, I didn't speak much either. People thought I was simple or broken, but an old gardener took me under his wing. He showed me how to see the world, how to find meaning in silence." Caroline's throat tightened. Silence had always frightened her when it came to Daniel. But Henry spoke of it as a gift. For the first time, Caroline realized she hadn't just dismissed a gardener. She had dismissed a man carrying a story, and perhaps the key to unlocking her son's voice. Despite her pride, Caroline asked Henry to return, not as a gardener, but as someone who could guide Daniel. Henry agreed, though he warned, "This won't be quick. Patience grows slower than any flower." The days that followed shifted subtly. Henry spent afternoons with Daniel in the backyard. Caroline watched from the kitchen window, her arms folded, unsure whether to trust or intervene. Henry showed Daniel how to kneel in the grass, how to close his eyes and hear the whispers of leaves. He taught him to trace the bark of trees, to notice patterns in petals, to sketch what he felt rather than what he thought. At first, Caroline dismissed it as nonsense, but then she noticed Daniel's shoulders loosening, his laughter bubbling up, his words, few but precious, spilling more often. One evening, Daniel rushed inside, cheeks flushed. "Mama, look!" He held out a drawing of the oak tree. But this time he had added something new, a small hollow at its base, darkened in shadow. Caroline frowned. She had never noticed it before, and for the first time curiosity stirred inside her. What exactly was hidden in their backyard? The next morning, Caroline walked to the oak tree. Sunlight filtered through its branches, painting shifting shadows on the grass. She knelt, brushing her hand along the trunk. And then she saw it, the hollow Daniel had drawn. A narrow opening half hidden by ivy. Her chest tightened. She peered inside but saw only darkness. Still, something about it unsettled her. When Henry arrived that afternoon, she confronted him. "What do you know about this?" Henry's gaze lingered on the hollow. His face grew solemn. "I hope Daniel wouldn't notice so soon." Caroline stiffened. "Why? What's inside?" Henry hesitated, then said quietly, "Not all secrets are meant to stay buried. But it's not mine to reveal." His words frustrated her, yet a part of her respected them. That night she dreamt of the oak, its branches stretching endlessly, its hollow glowing faintly, like it held something alive. The next day, Daniel tugged her sleeve. "Mama, can we open it, please?" Caroline's pulse quickened. She didn't want to encourage his curiosity, but deep down she knew the hollow was more than an empty space. It was the reason Henry had stayed close. Caroline gave in. With Henry by their side, they approached the hollow together. Henry handed Daniel a small flashlight. "This is your discovery, not mine." Daniel crouched, shining the beam inside. His breath caught. "Mama, there's something here." Caroline bent lower, heart hammering. Within the hollow lay a rusted tin box, edges worn with time. Henry carefully eased it out, brushing off dirt. Caroline's hands trembled as she pried it open. Inside were faded photographs, yellowed letters, and a silver locket. She gasped. The first photograph was of a young boy standing proudly beside the same oak tree, decades younger but unmistakable. Henry. Caroline looked at him in shock. This is you? Henry's eyes glistened. Yes, this tree has been keeping my memories safe for nearly 60 years. He held the locket gently. I buried these when I left home as a boy. My family lived here long before this house was built. I never thought anyone would find them again. Daniel's voice was hushed with awe. It's like treasure, and for Caroline it was. Not treasure of gold or wealth, but of truth, roots and legacy hidden beneath her own home. Caroline sat at the kitchen table that night, the tin box before her. She sifted through the letters written in delicate cursive. Most were from Henry's mother, words filled with love, encouragement, and longing. Henry explained softly, "We lost everything when my father passed. My mother sold the land. I promised myself I'd return one day, but life kept me away." Caroline's chest ached. She had spent years climbing ladders of success, believing security meant possessions and titles. Yet here sat an old man whose true wealth was love, carefully folded into letters and tucked beneath an oak tree. Daniel's voice pulled her back. "Mama, can we give them back to Mr. Henry?" "They're his." Caroline looked at her son, his eyes alive, his voice steady. She realized Henry had awakened something in Daniel no therapy or tutor had managed, and for the first time, Caroline felt her own walls begin to crack. She reached across the table, resting her hand on Henry's. "I'm sorry. For firing you. For not seeing who you really were." Henry smiled faintly. "Sometimes, Mrs. Hayes, we only see what we're ready to." Word of Henry's return soon spread among the neighbors. Whispers followed. People questioned Caroline's judgment.
Why is she letting an old gardener influence her son?
Shouldn't she be careful? Caroline felt the sting of their judgment. At work, colleagues raised eyebrows. At school, other parents avoided her. Yet when she looked at Daniel, sketching, laughing, speaking more freely, she knew she couldn't go back. But doubts crept in. What if they were right? What if Henry's influence was a risk she couldn't see? One rainy afternoon, Caroline confronted him again. "Why are you doing this?" "Why, my son?" Henry's voice was steady. "Because children like Daniel are rare. They notice the whispers the world hides, and if someone doesn't nurture that, the noise of life will bury it." Caroline's throat tightened. She thought of her own childhood, of a father too busy and a mother too tired to notice her drawings, her stories, her dreams. She had buried them all beneath ambition. Tears stung her eyes as she whispered, "I don't want that for him." Henry nodded softly. "Then let him keep his wonder. That's all I'm here to protect." Over the weeks, Daniel bloomed. He spoke more at school, surprising his teachers. He invited Caroline to sit beside him while he sketched. And one evening he even read aloud a short story he had written, about a boy who found treasure beneath an oak tree. Caroline's heart swelled. One Sunday morning, Henry invited them both to the cottage. He led them to his back garden, where wildflowers stretched in every direction. He placed a spade in Daniel's hands. "Here, plant something of your own. One day you'll come back to it." Daniel carefully lowered a small sapling into the soil. Caroline knelt beside him, her manicured hands dirtying for the first time in years. Henry smiled. "Now you've started your own legacy." Caroline looked at the boy, his eyes bright, his laughter ringing, and then at Henry, whose lined face glowed with quiet pride. For years she had thought love meant providing, houses, tutors, opportunities. But here love looked like mud on her hands, the sun on her boy's cheeks and an old gardener reminding them both that life's truest treasures grow slowly, patiently from the ground up. Months passed, and seasons turned. The oak tree stood tall, guarding its secrets, while Daniel grew braver. His teachers called Caroline, amazed at his progress. "He's speaking up. He's confident." What changed? Caroline knew the answer but struggled to explain. How could she tell them that a gardener's wisdom had done more than years of therapy? But life is never without shadows. One evening, Henry's steps slowed. He gripped the railing of the porch, his breath shallow. Caroline rushed to him, alarm filling her chest. He smiled faintly. "I'm old, Caroline. My seasons are nearly over." Her heart clenched. The thought of losing him, A man who had become family was unbearable. That night, Daniel curled beside her, whispering, "Mama, will Mr. Henry die?" Caroline held him tight, her own tears falling silently. "Someday, sweetheart, but not today." In her heart, though, she knew time was fragile, and so they cherished every moment, every lesson in the garden, every story Henry shared, every sketch Daniel brought to life. For in Henry's presence, they had learned something Caroline never imagined. The truest way to live was to notice, to nurture, and to remember. One crisp autumn evening, Henry called them both to the oak tree. The golden leaves fell gently around them like blessings from above. "I want you to promise me something," he said, his voice softer than ever. Caroline nodded, fighting tears. "Anything. Don't let Daniel forget. Don't let him lose the gift of seeing what others miss." Daniel reached out, gripping Henry's weathered hand. "I won't, I promise." Henry smiled, his eyes glistening. "Good, then my work here is done." Caroline's heart broke. She wanted to beg him not to speak that way, not to let go. But deep down she knew, life's seasons cannot be stopped. Weeks later, Henry passed quietly in his sleep, his cottage filled with flowers from neighbors, his memory etched into every corner of their town. At his funeral, Daniel stood beside the oak tree, clutching the sketchbook Henry had given him. He whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Henry, for showing me how to see." And Caroline, with tears falling freely, realized she had not only lost a gardener. She had lost a teacher, a friend, and the man who gave her son back to her. Years later, the oak tree still stood tall. Beneath its branches, Caroline often sat, watching Daniel. No longer a shy boy, but a confident young man sketching the world with steady hands. Every page of his notebook carried traces of Henry's wisdom. Every line was a reminder that silence was not weakness but strength, that hidden things, when nurtured, could bloom into light. Caroline reached out, pressing her palm to the rough bark. She whispered, "Thank you, Henry, for giving me my son." In that moment, a breeze swept through the branches, scattering leaves across the yard, and though he was gone, Caroline felt Henry's presence, gentle, patient, eternal. The backyard, once ordinary, now held a story that would never fade. A story of a boy, a mother, and the gardener who uncovered a secret buried not just in the earth but in their hearts. Sometimes heroes don't wear suits or hold titles. Sometimes they kneel in gardens carrying wisdom the world has forgotten. And sometimes, the miracles we need most are hidden in our own backyard. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, click the like button, and press the bell icon so you never miss another. Remember, sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who carry the greatest truths.